Good evening. Shabbat Shalom to all. Greetings to the 12 tribes scattered throughout the four corners of the earth. Greetings to those who are not the bloodline of Abraham or may not be the bloodline of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but also seek to be grafted into that olive tree by faith or through faith in the Hebrew Messiah, Yahweh Shai. Greetings also to all who want truth and righteousness, to all who are also tired of the corruption and violence of this earth. Greetings in the name of the Father, Yahweh, and of his Son, Messiah, Yahweh Shah. We are going to continue our study this evening in the prophecies of Daniel. We started Daniel last weekend, and we looked at chapters 1 and 2. And tonight we're going to continue with a deeper dive in chapter 2. We read through chapter 2, and we got some understandings, which we're going to just review tonight. And we went through the image that Nebuchadnezzar dreamt about, and Daniel was also given in vision. Tonight, we're going to get a deeper dive into the metals of the image. We're going to get a deeper dive into the metals of the image. And I mentioned that the last study that we had, of course, the fourth metal is extremely important to us today because it exists today and it will exist until the kingdom of Yah in the Messiah is created. So we're going to go into chapter 2, Shabbat Shalom, Ruth. We're going to go into chapter 2 of Daniel, and we're going to go into a deeper dive into the metals of Daniel chapter 2. Now, as we go to Daniel 2, I want to convey a couple of things. Number one, these empires that Daniel is represented, and as I mentioned before, there's been many empires on planet Earth. Okay, many empires. There have been, I mentioned, there have been Chinese empires, Inca empires, Indian, not just Incas, but various Indian empires and on planet Earth, Asian empires on planet Earth, Indian empires on planet Earth. There's been African empires on planet Earth. But the difference between these four in Daniel and all the other ones, except one, which we'll talk about, between these four and all the other ones, is these were dominant over the whole then known earth. Peace, Chama. These are dominant over the whole then known earth. Okay, we're just getting started, so you're not missing much. Over the whole then known earth. In other words, they were militarily dominant. Nobody could challenge them. Whenever you have a dominant empire, what makes it dominant is its military might. Okay, nobody can challenge them. In other words, they're the strongest kid on the block. Nobody can mess with them. Okay, so like when you had the Babylonian Empire, it was the most powerful army in the world, and it went into other countries and took over because it was the most powerful army in the world. Okay, and then the ones that followed after were also similar. Now, after the fourth one, we're going to see that there was a change made, and we're going to talk about that. Okay, we're going to talk about that now. Let's review what we already looked at in Daniel chapter 2. Let's review because we have a lot to go into in Daniel chapter 2. And so let's look at just as a quickly review, we know that the king of Babylon had taken captives from Judah, that Nebuchadnezzar, as king of Babylon, invaded Judah and destroyed the city of Jerusalem. And in destroying the city, he also destroyed the temple. And he took the holy vessels that was in the temple, and he brought them with him back to Babylon and put them in the temple of his God. And he took with him children of Judah as captives. Among these were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Okay, and again, I'm just reviewing. So now, then Nebuchadnezzar the king, Shabbat Shalom, David, Nebuchadnezzar the king had a dream, and the dream bothered him. And then he forgot the dream. And he went to his counselors, who were people that were magicians and soothsayers and necromancers and all that. He went to them in Babylon and asked them to not only tell him what he dreamt, but what it meant. And of course, none of these people could tell him what he dreamt. And so he was very angry, and he had issued a decree to kill all the wise men of Babylon, all of the spiritualists in Babylon. Of course, Daniel and his three companions were counted as those spiritualists, and they were also going to be killed. Then we know that Daniel inquired about what was going on because he apparently had no idea what was happening. And then when he found out, he requested the king give him time so they can call on his God and find out what was going on, which the king gave him. Daniel went and prayed with Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And in the night vision, the Most High revealed to Daniel Nebuchadnezzar's dream. Okay? Revealed to Daniel Nebuchadnezzar's dream. And then let's pick it up from there. And Daniel was able not only to tell Nebuchadnezzar what he dreamt that night, he was able to tell Nebuchadnezzar that what he was thinking prior to falling asleep. Nebuchadnezzar was concerned about the future. What should come in the future? That's what his concern was. What should come in the future? What is the? And a lot of people are like that even today. They're concerned with the future. That's why they go to tarot card readers and fortune tellers and people that look at crystal balls and read palms and all of that. They do that because they're looking for the future. And Nebuchadnezzar was no different in that regard. He wanted to know about the future. And he fell asleep thinking about that. And Daniel told him that. And also revealed to him that the dream that he was given was for the latter days, which we live. Okay, let's go over that. Daniel chapter 2. Daniel chapter 2. I'm going to start at verse 24 of Daniel chapter 2. Daniel chapter 2, beginning at verse 24. Now, the things that I just reviewed with you, we went over last week, and that's covered in the videos that are covering Daniel's 1 and 2. Okay, we have a total of 3 so far. Daniel chapter 1, Daniel chapter 2, total of 3 videos. It's on the Raw Hebrew Remnant channel on YouTube, and also rawhebrewremnant.org website. You can find them there. And of course, there's no charge. We don't charge anything. We don't ask for any donations. In fact, we actively say, do not send us donations. So I'm just telling you up front. It's all there for you if you wanted to review those videos to get the background. But I just gave you a quick synopsis of what we talked about. Okay, so Daniel chapter 2, beginning at verse 24. Therefore, Daniel went unto Arioch, whom the king had ordained to destroy the wise men of Babylon. And he went and said thus unto him, destroy not the wise men of Babylon. Bring me in before the king, and I will show the king the interpretation. Then Arioch brought in Daniel before the king in haste, and said thus unto him, I have found a man of the captives of Judah that will make known unto the king the interpretation. Okay, so he's telling him, I found one of the people that you took as captives from Judah, from the southern kingdom of Judah, and he's going to show you your dream and your interpretation. The king answered and said unto Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, art thou able to make known unto me the dream which I have seen and the interpretation thereof? Daniel answered in the presence of the king and said, the secret which the king hath demanded cannot the wise men, the astrologers, the magicians, the soothsayers show unto the king. But there is a God in heaven that revealeth secrets and maketh known to the king Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days. See, that's the last days. What shall be in the latter days? He wanted to know what was going on, what was going to happen in the future. Nebuchadnezzar was concerned about the future, and the Most High showed him in this dream. Okay. Now, before I continue, I also want to point out this past Wednesday night, we were discussing some things on Wednesday night as we had Wednesday night study. And one of the things that was brought out Wednesday night, which I want to also share here, is that many people think, I say, many people really think that they want the truth. Why do I say that? You're going to see that even in Daniel with Nebuchadnezzar when we get to chapter 3. Many people think they want the truth. But when the truth is actually given to them, they don't want it. Now, somebody would logically ask, of course, everybody wants truth. Everybody wants that. Who would reject truth? First off, the whole world has rejected truth. If you believe the Bible says that Asatan, the devil, is a liar. It says he's a murderer and a liar. It says he deceives the whole world. Messiah said when he tells a lie, he's speaking his own because he is a liar and he's the father of lies. So that when Adam and Eve received Asatan's word in the garden, they rejected truth and received the lie. And the whole world follows suit. And one thing I have learned that I'm going to share with you now, truth is hard. It's hard on us because we live in a society, in a culture on planet Earth that is founded on lies. And what happens in such a situation is we get so used to believing a lie, we begin to think that the lie is true. And when the Creator shows us what the truth is, we don't like it. Even those of us that eventually receive it, we first fight it because it goes against the lying culture upon which we've been raised. So Nebuchadnezzar wanted to know the future. Okay, he wanted to know the future. And the Most High is about to reveal it to him. And so, based on what I just told you, you can kind of guess what his eventual reaction is going to be. So let's take a look. Daniel chapter 28. It says, but there is a God in heaven that revealeth secrets and maketh known unto the king Nebuchadnezzar what shall be in the latter days. Thy dream and the visions of thy head upon thy bed are these. And he begins to tell him what he dreamt. As for thee, O king, thy thoughts came into thy mind upon thy bed, what should come to pass hereafter. And he that revealeth secrets maketh known to thee what shall come to pass. So he said, before you fell asleep, you were thinking about the future, the hereafter. You ever think about the hereafter? Some people do. Not everybody, but some people do. Some people don't want to think about the hereafter because, again, it might reveal a truth that they don't want to know. Okay, it might reveal a truth they don't want to know. So Nebuchadnezzar was saying, what's going to come past, like after I die? What happens after that? What happens in the hereafter? What happens in the latter days? He was thinking about that right before he fell asleep. Verse 30. But as for me, Daniel says, this secret is not revealed to me for any wisdom that I have more than any living, but for their sakes that shall make known to the interpretation to the king, that thou mightest know the thoughts of thine heart. For their sakes, who is there? That is the people that live in the latter days. In other words, this dream and the interpretation are for the people that live in the latter days. Who is that? That's you and me. The dream and the interpretation of Nebuchadnezzar's statue and what he had been shown is for us. It's for us. Okay? That's why I say that chapter 2 of Daniel is foundational to the rest of the book of Daniel. It's foundational. It's like the basics, like the ABCs. Like once you want to learn how to read in English, the first thing you need to do is learn the alphabet in English, correct? So you learn the 26 letters of the alphabet, then you start to learn how to put it together to make sentences, right? Well, Daniel 2 is the alphabet. Once you have this, you start, everything else kind of builds off of that in Daniel. Okay. So let's continue. Thou, O king, sawest, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible. So in the dream, Nebuchadnezzar is looking in the dream, and right in front of him is this big image. And he said the form was terrible. And what the word terrible means, it's not just like a bad thing all the time. In this particular context in the Old English, it means it's impressive. It's impressive. It's overwhelmingly impressive. So he's looking at this image. He sees it. It's overwhelmingly impressive. Okay. Verse 32. The image's head was of fine gold, his breast and his arms of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass, his legs of iron, his feet part of iron and part of clay. So now Daniel breaks down to him the various parts that he saw of this image. So he saw the image. The head of the image was gold. The breast and the arms were silver. The belly and the thighs of the image were brass. The calf area, the shin area, that's they call the legs, and the feet, where the legs were iron, and the feet part of iron and part of clay. I'm going to take my time and go over this again because you're going to need this, okay? The head was gold. The silver was the breast and the arms. The belly and the thighs were brass. The legs of iron, and the feet part of iron and part of clay. Now, the last time we studied this, I pointed out, which I will point out right now. What you notice about this order, first of all, there are 4 different metals: gold, silver, brass, and iron. 4 metals. What else do you notice? The softest metal and the most valuable, the most precious of them is the gold. It's in the top. It's the softest of the 4 and the most precious. The next softest and next in order of value is the silver. Okay, silver is harder than gold. The next one in value and hardness is the brass. Brass is harder than silver. The last one and the least valuable, but the hardest, let me say it again, it's the hardest one and it's the least valuable, is the iron. Is the hardest of all 4. It's the least valuable. Remember that. I'm praising the Most High that we're recording this by the grace of Yah, because y'all gonna need to go over this. This is affecting us right now. And you're going to see how as we study it. Okay? Daniel chapter 2, verse 34. Thou sawest till that a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon his feet that were of iron and clay, and break them to pieces. Let's stop again. You can see I'm taking my time here purposely. Okay? So a stone that was cut, in other words, it was cut out of another mountain. It was a mountain and the stone was cut out of it. And this stone hit this image in its feet. It said it hit it in its feet and break the feet to pieces. Now let's stop here again. What would happen to the image? Any image, you have an image and it has feet. It has a foundation that's feet. and something comes and crushes those feet. What happens to the image when the feet are crushed? Well, logically, the whole image collapses, correct? It collapses on itself, the whole image. If the feet are crushed, the whole image is going to fall. Okay, let's continue. Verse 35. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broken to pieces together and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floor. And the wind carried them away, that no place was found for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. You got an image, 4 different metals: gold, silver, brass, and iron. In the feet of this image is part iron and part clay. A stone, probably a boulder, right? If you look it up, crushed the feet. And not only did the image collapse, it collapsed to dust. It collapsed to dust. It said like chaff. You know what chaff is? Chaff is like, it's like dust. It's what's left after something is destroyed, like little pieces that can flow through the air and gone like dust. That's chaff. So the whole thing turned to dust. And the stone that smote the image grew up into a mountain that filled up the whole earth. Okay? The stone grew up into a mountain that filled up the whole earth. It smote the image in the feet, and the feet were made of iron and clay. Okay, let's continue. So now, Daniel says in verse 36, he tells Nebuchadnezzar, this is the dream, and we will tell the interpretation thereof before the king. So he says, now, I just showed you what you dreamt. I showed you what you were thinking before you fell asleep that night. And then I showed you what you dreamt. Now it's time for the interpretation. Okay, he tells Nebuchadnezzar, I showed you what you was thinking before you fell asleep. I showed you what you dreamt. And now it's time for the interpretation. Okay, verse 36. This is the dream, and we will tell the interpretation before the king. Verse 37. Thou, O king, art a king of kings, for the God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom, power, and strength, and glory. So he tells, first off, he tells Nebuchadnezzar, you're a great king. The Most High has given you power, strength, and authority. Let's confirm that with another witness in Jeremiah chapter 27. Jeremiah chapter 27. Notice what it says. Jeremiah chapter 27. Jeremiah 27, I'm going to begin at verse 1. Jeremiah 27, I'll begin at verse 1 and go down to verse 7. Jeremiah 27, 1 through 7. Notice what it says. In the beginning of the reign of Jehoiakim, the son of Josiah, king of Judah, came this word unto Jeremiah from Yahweh, saying, thus saith Yahweh to me, make thee bonds and yokes and put them upon thy neck, and send them to the king of Edom, and to the king of Moab, and to the king of the Ammonites, and to the king of Tyrus, and to the king of Zidon, by the hand of the messengers which come to Jerusalem unto Zedekiah, king of Judah. And command them to say unto their masters, thus saith Yahweh of hosts, the God of Israel, thus shall ye say unto your masters, I have made the earth, the man and the beast that are upon the ground, by my great power and by my outstretched arm, and have given it unto whom it seemeth meet unto me. And now have I given all these lands into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, my servant. And the beasts of the field have I given him also to serve him. And all nations shall serve him, and his son's son, until the very time of the land come. Then many nations and great kings shall serve themselves of him. So the Most High, through his prophet Jeremiah, sent messengers to the king of the then world. That's why he mentioned Edom and Moab. Those are the nations that surrounded Israel. That was what was considered the then known world. And he said, tell all these kings that I'm giving the whole world under the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. And they're going to serve him. They're going to all serve him. And then he said, after that, they're going to serve themselves of him. In other words, he's only going to rule for a while, then somebody else is going to come. But right now, I'm giving the whole world to king of Babylon. Everybody going to serve him. Okay? Now, of course, they did not accept that. And that's why Nebuchadnezzar came through. He came through with his armies, because again, that's the differentiation between the kings we're talking about, the kingdoms we're talking about, and any other empire on the planet. See, like the Mali Empire and the Timbuktu, they ruled West Africa. Okay, they ruled West Africa until another kingdom came and took them over. Chinese had Ming dynasties and and they ruled until another group of people came and took them over. But they didn't rule the whole earth. They just ruled East Asia. Okay, so these other empires, the Aztec Empire ruled until some other people came and took them over. Okay, but they didn't rule the whole earth. They just ruled what we know now to be Central America and parts of South America. But these kingdoms, the Bible says, is going to rule all. Nobody could challenge them because of their power that was given to them. So Nebuchadnezzar was the first one. Head of gold, he was given the whole world to rule. Okay, back to Daniel chapter 2. Verse 37 and 38. Thou, O king, art a king of kings, for the God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom, power and strength and glory. And wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field and the fowls of the heaven, hath he given into thine hand, and hath made thee ruler over them all. Thou art this head of gold. So he tells Nebuchadnezzar, the kingdom that's been given to you by the Most High, that this gold head is representing you. Remember that. Remember both the metal and who it represents, because it's going to come in handy in chapter 3. So the gold head represents Babylonian kingdom under Nebuchadnezzar. The Babylonian kingdom under Nebuchadnezzar. Okay, thou art this head of gold, Nebuchadnezzar. Verse 39. After thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee, and another third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth. Okay, so wait. So he tells Nebuchadnezzar, after you, see, Nebuchadnezzar wanted to know the future, right? He wanted to know the future, right? He wanted to know what's going to come. Well, Daniel just told him, you're ruling over everything, but then your kingdom's going to come to an end. Let me ask you, what king wants to believe their kingdom is coming to an end? Let me ask you now, what king wants to believe their kingdom is coming to an end? Let me ask you this. Let's bring it to today. If somebody was to stand up in the middle of Washington, D.C. with a voice that the whole D.C. could hear at the same time, with a voice that the whole East Coast could hear, right? Just imagine somebody could stand up and speak and everybody would hear, and they say, the American kingdom is ending. How do you think people would feel? What would people feel like? Right? Imagine that. Because no empire lasts forever. Right? And yet, if somebody was to say that, what I just said is true. No empire lasts forever. Yet, if I was to just say that and people heard it, government, whatever, they didn't say this dude is crazy. Or if I said it with a power that came from not from me, but from the Heavenly Father, and so that everybody within 1 million people heard me say it with a clear voice, like they heard on Mount Sinai, then they'd be scared. They'd be scared. And that fear would cause them to want to do what? Hurt me. Right? Am I telling the truth? Right? So if I spoke it with a power that they could see wasn't just a human power, and that word said, this is coming to an end, it would make them scared. And they would want to hurt me. Okay? So why? Because no king No ruler wants to ever hear that their kingdom will end. As a matter of fact, most rulers want their kingdom to go to who? Their children. Is that correct? They want the kingdom. Why do you think in England they keep having princes and then this duchess and all this, even though they ain't got no kingdom, but they trying to act like it, right? Because they royalty, right? So everybody, this is the next for the throne and all that. Because nobody wants to ever believe that their kingdom will come to an end. Well, here he's telling Nebuchadnezzar, you're the head of gold, but there's going to come another kingdom. And he's telling him, he said, that kingdom's inferior to you. Remember, it's silver. It's inferior to you. But they're going to rule. And then there's going to be one after that. That's inferior to that one. Remember I said the metals are lessening in value, right? So he said there's going to be a brass one that's going to bear rule over the whole earth. Okay? Verse 40. Watch verse 40. And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron. For as much as iron breaketh in pieces and subdueth all things, as iron that breaketh all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise. So the fourth one is a bruising, violent, strong empire. It's a bruising, violent, strong empire. It said it breaketh in pieces and bruises. It's the least valuable, but it says, it tells you, strong as iron, breaketh in pieces, violent. That's that last one, the fourth one. See, the legs were solid iron, but you got to the feet, there was a mixture of iron and clay. Remember that, right? But the strength of the iron is obviously stronger than clay, right? Iron is stronger than clay. Okay, so you get to the feet, the iron's the strongest one, but it's got clay with it as well. Okay, but it goes all the way to the end. Okay, Daniel chapter 2, verse 41. And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. But there shall be in it of the strength of the iron, for as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with miry clay. See? So it's going to be divided, but it's still the strong part is the iron part. So whatever the iron represents, brothers and sisters, as we're going to discover very shortly, whatever the iron represents is going to be around right now. It's around right now, and it's strong, but it's mixed with clay. Okay, mixed with clay. All right, trying not to lose anybody, trying to take my time and go through this thing bit by bit, just piece by piece. Might be boring, but this is eternal destiny we're dealing with. This is about what's going to happen to us. This is the hereafter. We're about to deal with it right now. You and I are the children that Daniel was dealing with. That's what we are. We're about to see the final fulfillment of that stone. We're just a few years away. Just a few years. So this is important stuff. I mean, I think you can understand it. So now, Daniel chapter 2. Verse 44. Very important. The most important. Verse 44 and 45. And in the days of these kings, shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. Important to note that this one, the stone is never coming to an end. There'll be no more after that. See, all these other kingdoms, there was one succeeding another. No. When the stone comes, that's the last kingdom. There'll be no more. Okay, verse 45. For as much as thou sawest that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it break in pieces the iron, the brass, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God has shown to the king what shall come to pass hereafter. And the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof sure. In other words, there is no doubt, king, this is going to happen. Now, Again, I want to reiterate, King Nebuchadnezzar wanted to know the future, didn't he? He wanted to know. See, all of us claim, something, not all of us, let me not say that, because like I said, there's a lot of people that want to keep their head in the sand. They don't want to know nothing about the future. They want to keep their head in the sand. In fact, I think the majority of people are like that. They don't want to deal with it. They don't want to know nothing about what's really coming. They don't want to know because they're afraid to look. You know what, though? The stone is coming. And you know what? Hiding your head in the sand ain't going to stop it. The stone is coming. Okay? It's coming. And so the people that do, most of the people that look at tarot cards or go to psychics or go to crystal balls or go to, most of them people, palm readers, they want what they want. When they go to listen to these people that give them this information, what they want good news, don't they? They want to know something good. Who am I going to meet? Am I going to get married? Am I going to have children? Am I going to get rich one day? They don't want to know nothing bad. And that's partially why those people exist. That's partially why they exist. The Most High is going to let us know exactly what it is, just like he told Nebuchadnezzar. Now, Nebuchadnezzar's initial reaction, like a lot of people, notice again, Daniel chapter 2, look at his initial reaction. Daniel chapter 2, verse 46 and 47. Then the king Nebuchadnezzar fell upon his face and worshipped Daniel and commanded that they should offer an oblation and sweet odors unto him. The king answered unto Daniel and said, of a truth it is that your God is a God of gods, a Lord of kings, a revealer of secrets. Seest that thou couldst reveal this secret. So his initial reaction, he's overwhelmed. Because he forgot the dream. Remember, he forgot the dream. And he was about to put all the wise men of Babylon to death because he needed to know what the dream was and the interpretation. Here comes this young boy. And this boy was about, Daniel must have been a teenager. Here comes this young boy, this Hebrew boy from the southern kingdom of Judah, this eunuch. And he says, my God told you this is what you was thinking before you fell asleep. And this is what you saw. And this is what it means. So the boy, at his initial reaction, he's overwhelmed. And as men do, the first thing he did was worship Daniel. Because on the planet Earth in which we live, we love to worship man. We love to exalt and glorify man. And in this world which we live even right now, you know who we exalt the most? Generally, the richest. Am I lying? Don't we exalt the richest, most powerful? In terms of earthly power, we exalt them. The ones that got most money, you want their autograph. That's how it is. Okay? So what does Nebuchadnezzar do? The most powerful man on the planet. He hears this, first thing he do, bow Daniel. That's why the Most High gave these instructions in his covenant to the Israelite people. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. No image, no graven image of anything that is in heaven above. See, somebody think, I believe Jesus is in heaven, so they got little pictures of Jesus, or they got a cross on their neck. The Most High say, I'm the Lord thy God, which brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God. See, he made sure that's the first thing he told us. I don't want no other gods, no images. I don't care what you think I look like. I don't care what you think heaven look like. I don't care what my angels step. I don't need you making an image to nothing. But we do it all the time, don't we? We make images all the time. We put tattoos on and stuff. We do all that. Because why? Because that's what man does. That's what man does. Especially when they don't know the Most High. That's what they do. Okay? And that's what Nebuchadnezzar did. First thing he did, worship Daniel. Okay? Worship Daniel. And he confessed, your God is the God of gods, man. Your God is the deal, he told Daniel, because he could reveal this secret. Your God is the deal. But wait, that's not going to last long. As you will see when we study chapter 3, that's not going to last long. Okay? He's like the guy the Messiah talked about in the parable where he said you receive the seed and he's initially excited, but it's in shallow ground and it doesn't last. Daniel chapter 2, verse 48 and 49. Then the king made Daniel a great man and gave him many gifts and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon and chief of the governors over all the wise men of Babylon. Then Daniel requested of the king, and he said, Shadrach, Meshach of the province of Babylon. But Daniel sat in the gate of Daniel became next in line as far as power to Nebuchadnezzar himself. He became next in line as far as power to Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel became the second line, right? As a result of this. And Daniel requested of his three friends that they would also be with him. And of course, Nebuchadnezzar complied and made them also. But Daniel was the chief counselor, the chief man in Babylon at that time. Okay. Now, let's go deeper into the matter. So we already know what the head was, correct? He said to Daniel, said to Nebuchadnezzar, thou art this head of gold. That's what he said. He told Nebuchadnezzar, thou art this head of gold. Very plain. No need to worry about interpretation there, because he said to Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon, your kingdom, that's the head of gold. Okay. Now, what we want to find out biblically is what kingdom came after Babylon, according to the Bible. Let's take a look. Daniel chapter 5. Daniel chapter 5. Daniel chapter 5. Okay, Daniel 5. I'm going to begin at verse 1. Go down from verse 1 down to verse 7. Daniel chapter 5, 1 through 7. Belshazzar the king made a great feast. Now, who was Belshazzar? Belshazzar was Nebuchadnezzar's grandson. He was Nebuchadnezzar's grandson. Now, remember, in Jeremiah chapter 27, in fact, let's take a look at it. Jeremiah chapter 27. Jeremiah 27. I'm going to read Jeremiah 27. I'm gonna read again, talk about Nebuchadnezzar. I'm gonna read again from verse 6. I'm gonna read from verse 6 down to verse 8. Jeremiah chapter 27, from verse 6 to verse 8. Notice what it says. And now have I given all these lands unto the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, my servant, and the beasts of the field have I given unto him also to serve him. All nations shall serve him. Actually, all I need is verse 7. All nations shall serve him, and his son, and his son's son, until the very time of the land comes. So he prophesied, he said, he's going to serve Nebuchadnezzar, all nations, and Nebuchadnezzar's son, and Nebuchadnezzar's grandson. Okay, so he said his son's son. Now his son was called Evil Merodach. That was his name, and that was Nebuchadnezzar's son served after him, and then after him, here this man right here, Belshazzar. Okay, so Daniel chapter 5. Let's read from verse 1 to 7. Daniel 5, 1 to 7. Belshazzar the king made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords, and drank wine before the 1,000. Belshazzar, whilst he tasted the wine, commanded to bring the gold and silver vessels which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken out of the temple, which was in Jerusalem, that the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines might drink therein. Then they brought the golden vessels that were taken out of the temple of the house of Yah, which was at Jerusalem, and the king and his princes, his wives, and his concubines drank in them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and of silver, of brass, of iron, of wood, and of stone. In the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand and wrote over against the candlestick upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And the king saw the part of the hand that wrote. Then the king's countenance was changed, and his thoughts troubled him, so that the joints of his loins were loosed, and his knees smote one against another. The king cried aloud to bring in the astrologers, the Chaldeans, the soothsayers, and the king spake and said to the wise men of Babylon, whosoever shall read this writing and show me the interpretation thereof shall be clothed with scarlet and have a chain of gold about his neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom of Babylon. So this is the story of the writing on the wall, which people use as a metaphor even to this day. I have seen what? The writing on the wall. What does that mean? That means I see something coming. You ever hear that, sir? I saw the writing on the wall, but this is where it comes from. Nebuchadnezzar's grandson Belshazzar saw the writing on the wall, and he peed on himself. When it says the joints were loose, he got scared and peed on himself. And he asked his wise men, "Can somebody show me this interpretation? This is scary stuff." Because he saw the hand writing on the wall. Okay. Now let's go. Let's move ahead. We don't have to read the whole thing of Daniel 5 yet. We're going to read that when we get there. But let's go move ahead, because what we're trying to find out here is what kingdom came after Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom. Right? That's what we're trying to find out. So let's move down Daniel chapter 5. I'm going to begin at verse, let's see. Daniel comes in. Let me give you the part where Daniel comes in. Okay, from verse 17. I'm reading from verse 17 down to verse 23. Daniel chapter 5, from 17 to 23. Then Daniel answered and said before the king, let thy gifts be to thyself, and give thy rewards unto another. Yet I will read the writing unto the king, and make known to him the interpretation. But, O thou king, the Most High Yah gave Nebuchadnezzar thy father, and the word father here is really his grandfather, a kingdom and majesty and glory and honor. And for the majesty that he gave him, all people, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him. Whom he would, he slew. Whom he would, he kept alive. And whom he would, he set up. And whom he would, he put down. But when his heart was lifted up, and his mind hardened in pride, he was deposed from his kingly throne, and they took his glory from him. And he was driven from the sons of men, and his heart was made like unto beasts, and his dwelling was with the wild asses. They fed him with grass like oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till he knew that the Most High God ruled in the kingdom of men, and that he appointed over whomsoever he will. Now we're going to see that what Daniel just told us in chapter 4. Okay, chapter 4 is going to give us all that in detail, what he just told Nebuchadnezzar's grandson, what happened to his grandfather. And thou, his son, O Belshazzar, has not humbled thy heart, though thou knewest all this, but has lifted up thyself against the Lord of heaven. And they have brought the vessels of his house before thee, and thou and thy lords, thy wives, and thy concubines have drunk wine in them. And thou hast praised the gods of silver and gold, of brass, wood, iron, wood, and stone, which see not, nor hear, nor know. And the God in whose hand thy breath is, and whose are all thy ways, hast thou not glorified. So now he's telling him, you about to lose it, bro. You done messed up. You took the holy vessels and you drinking them and whining them like it's a party. Your father had to learn the hard way. You knew he did, and you still didn't, now you still acting up, right? All right, now, verse 24. Then was the part of the hand sent from him, and this writing was written. And this is the writing that was written. Mene, mene, tekel uparsin. This is the interpretation of the thing. Mene, God hath numbered thy kingdom and finished it. Tekel, thou art weighed in the balances and art found wanting. Peres, thy kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. Who came next? The Medes and the Persians. So in other words, it was two peoples that came together to share power over what was Babylon's kingdom. First was the Medes and then the Persians, but they shared power. The Medes were the first one. They were rough. The Medes were rough. The Persians had the money. The Medes had the power, and they worked together. So the Medes came first, and then the Persians had the money. Okay, so let's take a look at that. Verse 28, thy kingdom is divided and given unto the Medes and Persians. Then commanded Belshazzar, and they clothed Daniel with scarlet and put a chain of gold about his neck and made a proclamation concerning him that he should be the third ruler in the kingdom. In that night was Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, slain, and Darius the Median took the kingdom, being about 62 years old. So now we know who the second king was. First was Babylon under Nebuchadnezzar. Then the Medes and the Persians came, and Darius took the kingdom at age 62. Okay, he was 62 years old, and they came in and they destroyed the kingdom of Babylon. They killed all the leaders and took over. That's how you know who rules. When you got an army and you got a military that nobody can mess with. And that was the Medes and the Persians. Babylon was time for them to be done, and they came in and took. Okay, so now we know the second kingdom. Let's find out what comes after the Medes and the Persians. Let's go to chapter 8, Daniel chapter 8. Now, again, we're not going to go into detail in chapter 8. I just want to find out who came after the Medes and the Persians according to the Bible. Okay, who came after the Medes and the Persians according to the Bible? That's what we want to find out. So we knew Babylon is gold. So the Medes and the Persians would obviously be what? They would be what? The silver, right? Medes and the Persians would be the breasts and arms of silver. They were next. Okay, then Daniel chapter 8. We want to find out what comes after the Medes and the Persians. Okay, Daniel chapter 8. Let's begin at verse 1. Daniel chapter 8, verse 1. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto me, even unto me, Daniel, after that which appeared unto me at the first. Now, this is an example of something that happens sometimes in the Bible, and I want to stop here and explain it to you for a second. Some people get confused. I want you to notice that Daniel 8 says that this vision was given to Daniel in the 3rd year of King Belshazzar. In other words, Belshazzar was king in his 3rd year of his rule when Daniel got this vision. What does that tell us? That tells us that the events that we are going to see here in this vision of Daniel chapter 8 happened prior to Daniel chapter 5. Because if you recall, Nebuchadnezzar was murdered. He was killed in Daniel chapter 5. So the events of Daniel 8, even though it's 3 chapters later, actually took place prior to Daniel 5. I want to make sure you guys understand that. So that when Daniel walked into Belshazzar's court that night, when the writing was on the wall, he had already received the information that's given here in chapter 8. He had already received the information. He already knew what was coming. That's why he can interpret the writing. He knew what was coming because he had already received that before he walked into the palace. See? So sometimes it's not always chronological. It's not always like everything just happens chapter 5, 6, 7, and 8 in order. It doesn't happen like that. In this one, you can see that it was in the 3rd year of Belshazzar's kingdom, whereas in chapter 5, he was killed. All right? So let's take a look at this. I just want to point that out so that you get a clearer picture of what's going on. So when chapter 5 happens, Daniel is going into Belshazzar's palace that night to interpret the writing on the wall, and he already knew what was going to happen because it was showing him here. Okay, Daniel chapter 8, let's go to verse 2. And I saw, Daniel says, and I saw in a vision, and it came to pass when I saw that I was at Shushan in the palace, which is in the province of Elam. And I saw in a vision, and I was by the river Ulai. So he's in Shushan. Apparently, the Babylonian palace was in a city called Shushan. Okay? And there was a river nearby, Ulai. As a matter of fact, the Bible, someplace, I forgot where, it tells us that the river actually flowed through the main city. Right? Like, you know, some rivers, some cities have rivers that flow right through the middle of them, like New Orleans, like Venice. Well, this was that. So they had Ulai was there. He was there by the banks of the Ulai, and he had a vision while he was near that river in that palace in Belshazzar's kingdom. Verse 3. Then I lifted up my eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram, which had 2 horns, and the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. So he's in vision. He's next to a river, Ulai. You're going to see that Daniel has couple visions by rivers. He's in the palace, he's near a river, and he has a vision. First thing he sees is a ram. A ram is an animal, right? Or otherwise, a beast, we could say. Like a ram is an animal, right? So he sees the ram, and the ram has 2 horns in his head. But they came up out of his head, and the second horn came up higher than the first one. Okay, so there's two horns, and the second horn came up higher than the first one. Okay, that's what he said. Okay, and the higher came up last, verse 4. And I saw the ram, watch this now, and I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward, so that no beast might stand before him, neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand. But he did according to his will and became great. So whatever the ram was, notice the directions that it pushed. It pushed west. Listen carefully now. It pushed west, it pushed north, and it pushed south. Here's a quiz question. Are you ready? Are you guys ready in Power Talk? Testing 1, 2, 3. Here's a quiz question. Here's a quiz question. All right. So the ram pushed north, it pushed west, and it pushed south. What direction was the ram coming from? It pushed north, it pushed west, and it pushed south. That's right. There's only one direction left. So it's coming from the east. So this ram was in the east and it's pushing north and it's pushing west and it's pushing south, and nobody can stand before it. I'm glad you're smart. Okay, good. So it's pushing in all these different directions, but nobody can stand before it. So it ruled the whole earth because it came out the east and it ruled north, south, and west. Okay. Okay. Everybody got that? All right. So far, so good. All right. So now, who is that ram? Let's take a look. Actually, the chapter tells us very plainly. Daniel chapter 8. Daniel chapter 8. Let's go to verse 20. Daniel chapter 8 and verse 20. Notice what it says. Daniel 8 and verse 20. The ram which thou sawest having two horns are the kings of Media and Persia. So it tells you very plainly. You don't have to guess. So it tells you that first you had Babylon. Then here's the second time it's telling you the ram with two horns are the kings of Media and Persia. And I want you to notice it said that the second horn, the higher one, came up last. So you had the Medes that first was in charge of things because the Persians was rich and they hired the Medes. But then the Persians themselves came up and they were the higher one. So they had the Medes first, then the Persians. So the ram are the kings of Media and Persia. So you don't have to guess about that. It just tells you. So let's go back to the beginning of the chapter again. You saw the ram, and it said, I want you to notice, it said about the ram, verse 4, I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward, so that no beast might stand before him. Remember, he ruled the whole earth. Neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand, but he did according to his will and became great. So you had this ram, it said it became great. Nobody could stand before him. It was ruling the earth. This is the thing about world powers that we need to understand. What world powers have in common is they go conquer other countries. World powers conquer other countries. They don't just stand pat. Like Israel was giving a certain land, right? The land given to Israel. And when Israel had that land, they weren't going to go conquer any other country because that, matter of fact, the Most High said to them, don't go touch Moab because I've given that to Lot. Don't touch Ammon. Don't touch Edom because I've given that to Esau. So they weren't supposed to go into other countries. They weren't supposed to go back to Egypt and take over Egypt because they got their land. But these world powers, these pagan ones, they're not like that. They're going to come into everybody's country and take over. I'm trying to make y'all understand something. World powers go into other countries and take over. Okay? So the ram was Medes and Persians. Okay? All right. Let's look at the next one. Daniel in verse 5. So we had a ram, Medes and Persians. We had the head of gold, Babylon. Okay? Then the silver, Medes and Persians. Okay? Verse 5. Daniel chapter 8, verse 5. And we're going to go into chapter 8 in great detail. We're just not going to do it now because all we're trying to find out is the four kingdoms. That's all we're trying to find out right now. Okay? So Daniel chapter 8, verse 5. And as I was considering, behold, a he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth and touched not the ground. And the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. Now, I'm trying not to confuse you. All right. But all right, hold on. We just established that the Median Persian Empire was based in the East. Now, today, the land that the Persians occupied today is called, what's called? Iran. Iran. Iran is that land. Okay. Iran is that land that it represents. Now, Iran is not the Persian Empire anymore. That's Iran, right? So it's a Muslim state right now. But back in the day, it was a world empire, and it was based in that land that we now call Iran. Okay, and now going east from Iran, where you headed? If you look on the map, you going east from Iran. Where you headed? You headed toward what's now Turkey. You headed toward Greece. You headed toward the West Bank, right? It said south. You headed toward Africa, right? It said north. You headed toward where Medes was, which is Russia. That's what. Okay. So all right. So now what we just saw, it said in verse 5, a goat came from the west. So here's Iran. Well, then it was Persia. And a goat is coming from the west. Now, notice what it said about this goat, though. It said, I was considering, behold, a he goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth and touched not the ground. In other words, this goat was floating so fast, it was like it jumped and it was floating through the air. It touched not the ground. And the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. So this had a big horn in the middle of his head, and it was coming so fast from the west, and it was coming toward the east. It was in the air. Okay? Daniel chapter 8. Let's find out about this goat. Verse 21. And the rough goat is the king of Grecia. So what came after the Medes and the Persians? The Greeks. What was that notable horn? Well, who was the first major king of the Greek Empire? Talk to me. This is basic history. You got this in high school. Who was the first major king of the Greek Empire? That notable horn. Alexander the Great. Look at it. Alexander the Great. That was the first one. Okay. Alexander the Great. That's what they call him, the Great, right? Let's go back. Daniel chapter 8. Let's look at verse 5 and 6 again, because this dude was flying. Notice again, Daniel chapter 8, verse 5 and 6 and 7, actually. Okay. And I was considering, behold, a he goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth and touched not the ground. And the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. And he came to the ram which had two horns, which I had seen standing before the river, and ran into him in the fury of his power. So he was coming quick, and he was mad. He was mean. They called him the rough goat, what Daniel called it, the rough goat. And he hit that ram. And I saw him come close unto the ram, and he was moved with choler, that is anger or rage, against him, and smote the ram and brake his two horns. And there was no power in the ram to stand before him, but he cast him down to the ground and stamped upon him. And there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. Therefore, the he goat waxed very great. So you saw that the ram was great. The he goat came with violence. That's the brass. That's harder than silver. That's harder than silver, right? That's the brass. He came with anger and fury, and he stomped. He ran into the ram, then he stomped it to death. That was a mean dude, that Alexander the Great. Matter of fact, Alexander the Great, in history, he started leading armies and destroying nations when he was 19 years old. Grown men were following because he was a military genius. That Caucasian boy was a military genius, and he was rough. Okay, that's why you see right now, you see in Egypt, all of them Egyptian statues with the noses blown off. Who did that? Alexander. Do you know that? Do you know that Egypt has a capital? It's called what? Alexandria. Alexandria. You think that's accidental? Original name wasn't Alexandria, nor was the country called Egypt. It was Kemet. Alexander changed all that because it was prophesied that he should come from where he came from in the west and take over. Son of Yafet. I want you to notice these are sons of Yafet. This is the Greek. This is Yavan. Let's go back to Genesis chapter 10 real quick. The Greek, right? All right, Daniel chapter 10. And the Medes, right? Daniel, excuse me, Genesis. I'm sorry, I keep saying Daniel. I'm sorry. Genesis chapter 10. Let's go back where we were talking about last week. Genesis chapter 10. Watch this now. Genesis chapter 10. Okay. Now, from verse 1 down to verse 5. Now, these are the generations of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And unto them were sons born after the flood, the sons of Japheth, Gomer, Magog, Madai. If you look up Madai, that's where your Medes come from. Madai. That's where your Medes come from. And Yavan. You look up Yavan, that's the father of the Greeks. And Tubal and Meshach and Tiras. And the sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz. Who comes out of Ashkenaz? Those are the people that they call Jews today. The Caucasian people that you see, with the curls in their hair and the black beanies on, and they stand at the Wailing Wall like that, them Ashkenaz. That's where they come from. That's who they are. They even call themselves Ashkenazi Jews. That's what they call themselves. I'm not making that up. Look it up. Ashkenazi. That's where they come from. Okay? They are not bloodline relatives of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They will tell you they are what they call converts. They are converts. They're not bloodline relatives. Okay? They're converts. And they come from Ashkenaz, from Yafet. That's why I think it's very interesting when they say if you speak against them, they call you anti-Semitic. Because bloodline-wise, they're not Semitic. They're from here. It says right here, Japhet. They're converted to this religion they call Judaism. But their bloodline is Japhet. See? And the sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz, Rephath, Togarmah, and the sons of Javan. That's where you get your Greek from. Elisha, Tarshish, Katim, Dudanim. By these were the isles of the Gentiles divided in their lands, one after his tongue, everyone after his tongue, after their families in their nations. That's where you get your Yafet from. All your Europeans in the original is from your Yafet. Your Irish, your Polish, your Germans, your UK Anglos, your Anglo-Saxons, your Hurulis that are your Italians, your Goths, your Visigoths, your Ostrogoths. All of them is where you get all of the peoples today that you call European. Okay, that's where they all come from. And at this point, you're starting to see now. And as prophecy is showing us, first you had a Hamite, Nebuchadnezzar. Then you had a persons that were a mixture of Persia and Medes. And the Medes were the ones that came and cruelly took over. See, the Persians had the money, Medes had the strength, the power. And they came with their military might, took it over. They come from what you call now Russia. After them came what? The Greeks. And they came harder. They stomped the Medes and the Persians to pieces. Okay? So so now we got this now. Babylon, Medes and the Persians, and then the Greeks. Now, at the time of the Greek Empire, the sons of Japhet were firmly in world power. Okay? Firmly in world power. Now, let me ask you something right now. Honestly, truth. Aren't the sons of Japhet in power right now? Do they not rule the world right now? And of the sons of Japhet that's in power right now, who's the most powerful of the sons of Japhet right now? Who's the whole earth afraid of right now? Who they afraid of? Because of their military power. Come on now. And they rule the earth. So you can see the sons of Japhet started way back then. And they go into now because it's prophesied. But as you see, Nebuchadnezzar was shown these kingdoms each come to an end. Every world kingdom comes to an end until you get to the stone. When the stone comes, it rules the earth and nobody takes over. But it rules forever. Okay, so now we got the Greeks. Before them, Medes and the Persians. And at the top of the pile, the first one, Babylonians. What comes after the Greeks? Let's learn. We got for this one. I'm going to take you to the New Testament, to Luke. Luke chapter 2. Let's take a look at Luke chapter 2. Okay, Luke chapter 2, beginning at verse 1. Luke chapter 2. Now, it does tell us in Daniel, but it's kind of hidden in there. Okay, kind of hidden in there. We're going to go more into detail later. But for now, I just want to know what these four empires are. So we got Babylon. After them came the Medes and the Persians. After them came the Greeks. Who came after the Greeks? That's a world empire. Remember now, before I read this, remember that iron goes all the way to the end. That iron goes all the way to the end. It goes all the way to the end. So when the stone comes that fills the earth and it hits the iron is the same iron we get ready to read right here. Okay? Daniel chapter 2. I'm sorry. Luke chapter 2, beginning at verse 1. Luke chapter 2, beginning at verse 1 and 2. And it came to pass in those days that there went out a decree from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be taxed. And this taxing was first made when Cyrenius was governor of Syria. Caesar Augustus had the power to tax the entire planet. Therefore, it can be said, we know now, Caesar Augustus was a world emperor. So that whatever his kingdom was ruling the earth. Because he had the power to tell the whole world, y'all gonna pay us. Well, let me ask you. Caesar Augustus was emperor of what empire? The Roman Empire. The Roman Empire, which was the empire that was in power when the Messiah first appeared on the earth. Okay? So when the Messiah appeared, Roman Empire. That one came after the Greek, which is also, if you notice, is interesting, right? In Luke, let's go to the end of the epistle of Luke, or the gospel of Luke. Let's go to the end of it for a second. I want to show you something here. Luke chapter 23. Watch this, Luke chapter 23. When Messiah is hanging on the cross. He's on the tree now, right? He's on the tree. And let's see, the Messiah's on the tree. I'm going to start Luke chapter 23 I'm going to start at verse 34 and I'm going to go down to verse 38. Luke chapter 23 from verse 34 to verse 38. Particularly, we want to pay close attention to verse 38. Okay, watch what it says. Then said Yahushua, or Jesus, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And they parted his raiment and cast lots. And the people stood beholding, and the rulers with them derided him, saying, he saved others, let him save himself, if he be Messiah, the chosen of Yah. And the soldiers also mocked him, coming to him and offering him vinegar, and saying, if thou be the king of the Jews, save thyself. And a superscription also was written over him in letters. What letters? Letters of Greek and Latin and Hebrew. Greek and Latin and Hebrew. This is the king of the Jews. Why was it written in Greek and Latin and Hebrew? Well, because when the Greeks ruled the earth, they were so dominant that the world began to speak not only their own homegrown languages, but also what? The Greek language. In fact, our modern education system is based on the Greek system. In fact, the Greek system, they stole those ideas when they went down to what's now called Alexandria, which means they stole it from the sons of Ham. And then they went and they created their own version of it, and they took credit for it, and they got their own philosophers, all that stuff they learned. Why do you think they was hanging out in Egypt so much? they was learning stuff down there. And they didn't want to give those people in Egypt credit. After all, if you look on those walls, what did those people look like? I tell you what, they didn't look like Greeks. So they started giving their own philosophers all this props and all that. Then came the Romans, and they took over from the Greeks, but they kept the Greek educational system. Where you got degrees and bars and stuff, that was from the Greeks. And so that language stayed. Now, what about Latin? Latin was the original language of the Roman Empire. And of course, Hebrew. Why? Because Messiah was a Hebrew. And they were crucifying him in the land of the Hebrews. So it was written in Hebrew and Latin and Greek. So now we know the four kingdoms: Babylon, Media Persia, Greek, and Rome. So wait a minute. The statue The Rome would have to represent the iron. The iron is Rome. So if the iron is Rome and it went all the way into the feet, that means that today, as I am speaking to you now, Rome is running things. But you might say to yourself, and rightly so, they no Roman Empire running anything now. But they got a puppet. They are running things. How they doing it? They doing it first. They transformed, and we're going to see the transformation in Daniel. They transformed from a military power to a religious power. And instead of having their own armies, they use other nations' armies. They don't have to use their own armies. So that the Vatican is its own country. And again, I go look it up for yourself. The Vatican is not just a religious place in Rome. It is a separate country within Italy. It gets ambassadors, it sends ambassadors, and that country, the Vatican, has a one man that runs both the religion, because it's a religion, and the country. One man runs both the religion and the country. And the religion that he runs is worldwide. Is worldwide. Okay? Now, how does he, that is the Pope of Rome, have an army? Who's his army that he uses to rule the earth? How do they do that? Revelation chapter 13. I've been bringing you all to Revelation 13 for weeks now. There's a reason for that. And let me tell you something else. We're going to get more Revelation 13 as we get deeper in Daniel. As a matter of fact, Revelation and Daniel are like twins. You're going to find out. But Revelation chapter 13. Revelation 13. Now, I'm going to tell you right now that the beginning of Revelation 13 is totally explained from Daniel chapter 7, which also reviews the same four empires that we just saw in Daniel 2. But you needed to know the empires from Daniel 2 so that when we get to Daniel 7, you will understand. Okay? But these empires are represented. Now I want you, let's go back for a second. Before we go forward, let me just stop here for me. That statue that Nebuchadnezzar saw, that had the gold, the silver, the brass, the iron and clay. That statue was one statue, right? So you had the gold first, silver, brass, iron and clay. One statue. So what is that? Why do I bring that up? And that's why Daniel said when it was struck in the feet, all those kingdoms disappeared. Because all those kingdoms that Babylon started first, okay? Then there was the Medes and the Persians. And the Babylonians was the head, but then the Medes and the Persians took things from Babylon. So in other words, it incorporated things from Babylon into its empire. Then came the Greeks. And as I just mentioned, the Greeks incorporated things that were from the Medes and the Persian empire into its empire. Then came the Romans. And the Romans, as we just saw, incorporated things from the Greek empire into its empire. So that in the Roman rule, there's pieces of Babylon, Media, Persia, and Greece in it, which is why I said we got the Greek education system, right? What is the whore called? What is on her forehead? Revelation chapter 17, Babylon. Mystery, Babylon the Great. Okay, she got that in her forehead. That whore represents Rome. Okay, and the Medes and the Persians, we're going to find out what their claim to fame is when we read Daniel chapter 6. The Medes and the Persians' claim to fame is this. Listen here. Infallibility. What do I mean by that? They can never admit to ever making a mistake. Medes and Persians. Once they make a law, it's forever. They can never admit that the law was wrong. Daniel 6 will show us that. Okay. And that, wait, we've heard that before too. It's called papal infallibility. They get that from them. Okay. Which is why when you see the Pope, he has different things on. Like he has a hat that's shaped like a fish. He gets that from the Philistines. He's got a Egyptian cross in his hand, Maltese cross. That he get that from Babylon. Okay, from the Hamites. And if you look closely at everything he's wearing, it comes from different pagan empires. Okay, because he's a conglomeration of all of it. The Vatican is the conglomeration of all of these things. Okay, so Revelation chapter 13, beginning at verse 1. beginning at verse 1. Revelation 13. I'm going to begin at verse 1. And I'm going to go down to verse 8. Revelation 13 from 1 to 8. And I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horn 10 crowns, and upon his head the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. And I saw one of his heads, as it were, wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world wondered after the beast. And they worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies. And power was given unto him to continue 42 months. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against Yah, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle and them that dwell in heaven. So you got a blasphemous religious power that the whole world follows. And it's giving its power from the devil. It said, and the dragon gave it its power, seat, and authority, and it deceives the whole world. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And power was given him over all the kindreds and tongues and nations. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb, slain from the foundation of the world. If any man have an ear to hear, let him hear. Look, so this is about worship. This is a religious power that's ruling the earth with the power of the dragon sustaining it. The dragon is the devil. Okay, now Revelation chapter 13. This is where we're going to finish tonight. We're going to continue tomorrow, but we're going to finish this tonight. And verse 11. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth. Watch this one. And he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. So wait a minute. The 7-headed beast receives power and seat and authority from the dragon. 7-headed beast. And has the whole world worshiping that beast. The dragon has the whole world worshiping that beast, right? This second beast, it looks like a lamb, but that same dragon that's giving power, seat, and authority to the first beast is inside the second one. So in other words, it's dressed like a lamb, but within that costume, there's a dragon. Because when he opened his mouth to speak, you hear the dragon's voice. Okay? In the Bible, what does the lamb represent? Did not John the Baptist look at Messiah and say, behold, the Lamb of God, which takes away the sin of the world? So Messiah is the lamb. Revelation says in another place, glory to Yah and the lamb that was slain. They call him lamb many places. So the lamb represents Messiah. So in other words, this a beast represents a country. We're going to see that tomorrow. But this country says it represents the lamb. It looks like the lamb. It says, I'm representing Messiah. But he's not representing Messiah, really, because inside of him, he's being controlled. Matter of fact, Messiah, the lamb, is only a costume. Within him is the dragon. So that the second beast is being controlled by the first beast. That's how the Vatican gets its army. By the second beast, by the second nation. The nation with the most powerful army on the planet is being controlled by the dragon that is set power, seat, and authority to that religious power that's based in Rome. The Bible is telling you. Okay. Now, tomorrow, by the grace of the Most High, we're going to talk about the clay. We're going to talk about the clay tomorrow. Okay. We're going to talk about the clay and the iron, and how the clay is ruling with the iron right now. You can kind of guess, if you look at it, who's really ruling the earth right now. If I just told you the Vatican's ruling the earth right now, and he's got a partner, now you don't have to guess about the partner. It's the United States of American government. But the government of the United States is not the clay. That's the lamb-like beast. So who's the clay that rules with Rome? Think about it. You know, just think about it. Tomorrow, the Bible going to show us. Okay? Tomorrow, the Bible going to show us. Okay, tonight I say to you, please enjoy your rest. You got to have a lot of questions. Go ahead and go back through this yourself prayerfully. Ask the Most High to show you. Ask him to show you the truth. Ask the Most High, the Creator, to show you the truth, because he will. I'm gonna tell you right now, you're not gonna like it. It's not gonna taste good to you, because we used to drink in lies. It's not gonna taste good to you. Okay. But if you receive the truth, there's a blessing. It's a blessing for all who receive the truth. Blessed is they that keep the things which are written therein. That's what was told. Okay, blessing. So there's a blessing from the Creator. You cannot receive. Listen, one more thing I want to tell you. You can't receive the blessing of this earth and the blessing of the Creator at the same time. If the Creator is happy with you, the earth is not going to be happy with you. And if the earth is happy with you, the Creator is not going to be happy with you. That's how it works, my friends. Okay? May the Most High bless you. Let's continue to pray for each other as we are in these final days.